This is a big week for movies. We got the goat staring dudes, we got The Box, we got The Fourth Kind, there's Christmas Carol, Christmas Story, whatever it's called, in 3D. But now we're going to talk about The Box. The Box is the third feature film by Richard Kelly, who directed the famously weird Donnie Darko. It's based on a story by Richard Matheson that was adapted in the 80s into an episode of Twilight Zone.
I like these kinds of movies where someone's presented with an ethical dilemma. A young couple's given a box, and they have 24 hours to decide if they want to push a button, and if they do push a button, they get $1 million. But someone that they do not know somewhere in the world will die. Totally love this kind of story. Didn't know it was a Twilight Zone episode, but that's the first thing I thought of while watching the movie. Lots of suspense, and you kind of get carried away in the story, and weird stuff happens. So I was really enjoying it until about 2/3 of the way in. Kind of felt like it started losing steam. Weird sort of paranormal conspiracy theory government stuff happens in this movie, and I'm not saying I want to know like what's behind the curtain, or I don't need all the answers, but then there's one scene in particular where it's literally just exposition. They cut to a scene where the guy finally is like, so what's this all about? And then the guy's like, well, let me tell you. And then stuff keeps happening that doesn't necessarily add up to what you just heard. So I don't know. I found it confusing. I'm sure I can't be the only one. Again, great setup, great performances, totally Twilight Zone vibe. And the thing that sold it in the beginning, at least, was this amazingly classically sounding Hollywood score done by the Arcade Fire, which sounds great and totally sets the tone. And what ends up happening is that the music literally never takes a break. The first scene of the film had zero music in it at all. All of a sudden, the music slowly starts to build. It doesn't let up. In the beginning of the film, it felt like it was kind of a perfect sort of punctuation to this thriller that they're setting up by having this classical Hollywood score. But then by the end of the film, it felt more like a parody.
I loved it, but it's one of those films that I consciously, at a certain point in the film, decided to love. I thought the sets were great. Whoever they got to do the set deck and the props in it, they made all these really weird choices to have everything be brand new. Usually they make it look old, and everything in the film is pristine. And I thought it really worked. It made it really kind of spooky. Richard Matheson's got to be, he's one of those authors, he's got to be, if not the most, then certainly one of the most adapted authors. He wrote I Am Legend, which has been remade 3 times. He wrote What Dreams May Come, which got remade starring Robin Williams. He wrote a bunch of stories that became Twilight Zone episodes. He's a gift for writing stories and novellas that have kernels of ideas that Hollywood screenwriters and directors think that's a great first 2/3 of a movie. The original story, Button Button, is like 12 pages. The movie version has got like a whole nother half of the story kind of tacked onto it. And I think that it kind of worked in this one, just because I have a deep and abiding love for Twilight Zone stuff. I know exactly what point you start to feel that way, because I felt it too at the end of the second act of the film, when it starts to go off in a direction that doesn't feel as simple and as grounded and as classically sci-fi, mystery, Twilight Zone-y as the first 2/3 of the film. And there's a point at which you remember, oh, this is directed by the guy that made Donnie Darko. He's got a unique gift for making stuff that's, on one hand, legitimately creepy, suspenseful, and off-putting, and on the other hand, simultaneously completely retarded. There's a whole bunch of supporting characters that are drones that control everything, and half the time they're legitimately scary, and the other half the time they're like, it's...
You're laughing at them.
Yeah, that's a choice. Like that's a... You can't have one without the other with Richard Kelly's work. So you think, okay, like when you're watching any episode of Twilight Zone, you kind of have to decide whether or not you're going to enjoy it, because they're so patently ridiculous. Like the guy that sees the gremlin on the wing of the plane. You don't think, oh my God, there's a gremlin on the plane. The really good Twilight Zone episodes have enough good stuff in them that you decide to like them. And this had enough good stuff in it that I decided to like it. And I got to give it a 8 out of 10.
Being that I enjoyed 2/3 of the film, I will give it a 6.66 out of 10.
7.7. That's the score.